Senator Gillibrand just cornered Secretary Hegseth in a relentless pursuit of accountability, demanding hard answers about hidden costs and massive oversight cuts that the public was never meant to see. She directly questioned whether the administration deliberately misrepresented the true operational range of their missiles, pressing for the exact margin of deception, amid reports suggesting a staggering discrepancy of 4,000 kilometers. She further challenged whether American taxpayers are genuinely expected to shoulder the catastrophic financial burden of this escalating conflict, asking if the objective is to expend $1 or even $2 billion every single day. She highlighted a breathtaking request sitting before the committee for an additional $200 billion, simply to finance the continuation of the war. For anyone who pays taxes in this nation, this specific congressional hearing demands the utmost attention. From the painful reality of inflation at the domestic gas pump to a staggering 90% reduction in civilian oversight, this represents a profound battle for transparency that the establishment assumed would remain hidden. Here is the unvarnished reality of that confrontation. It remains highly uncertain whether there is a full and proper appreciation for the sheer magnitude to which the American populace fundamentally opposes this military engagement. It functions entirely as an unauthorized war, historical mantra and procedurally. Presenting a case before the United States Congress serves as the established mechanism for the American people to actively participate in grave national discussions. Citizens across the nation, and particularly those residing in the senator's home state of New York, harbor deep and profound frustrations for a vast multitude of valid reasons. Foremost among these pressing concerns is the absolutely exorbitant financial toll, as current expenditures have already surpassed a staggering $25 billion, with conservative estimates projecting a burn rate of $1 billion a day. The public absorbs this devastating financial shock directly, enduring continually surging prices for diesel and gasoline, essential for daily life. Furthermore, they are intimately feeling the crushing weight of escalating grocery bills at the checkout counter, leading to a state of widespread and profound exhaustion. The electorate is truly exhausted. Compounding this severe economic strain are incredibly grave moral and strategic concerns regarding exactly how the prosecution of this campaign is being handled by military leadership. Citizens read horrifying reports detailing strikes on 22 separate educational facilities, alongside accounts regarding the destruction of a girls' school, resulting in hundreds of tragic fatalities. Furthermore, amidst a robust and serious national discourse currently taking place regarding artificial intelligence, the senator emphasized a glaring omission, noting the absolute lack of a definitive guarantee that autonomous systems will not be granted the final authorization over targeting determinations, particularly in catastrophic scenarios where nuclear weapons are being deployed. She framed this as a monumental issue requiring immediate debate, aggressively pressing Secretary Hegseth on exactly why the administration persists in prosecuting a war that fundamentally lacks the backing of the American populace. In response to this intense interrogation, the secretary initially referenced a prior closed-door session, noting with deliberate emphasis that the private conversation differed significantly from the public spectacle occurring before the broadcasting cameras. He attempted to justify the administration's entrenched stance by claiming his primary duty is representation, acknowledging the fury of the constituents but countering with his own perspective. He asserted that when speaking directly with Americans, and particularly when conversing with deployed military personnel, he encounters profound gratitude for a commander-in-chief willing to confront a persistent threat. He heavily invoked the 47-year history of Iranian hostility, specifically their targeting of American citizens, alongside the hypothetical catastrophic consequences to global stability if the regime's nuclear ambitions were ever actually realized. He challenged the committee to genuinely consider the ultimate cost to the American public and the world if the globe's most dangerous regime acquired a functional nuclear weapon. However, the formidable counter-argument presented was that the nation is not demonstrably safer because of this ongoing conflict, and that initiating a highly aggressive decapitation strike inherently increases the likelihood of retaliatory military action reaching United States soil. Senator Gillibrand asserted a complete absence of credible evidence indicating any imminent threat or intention to attack the homeland, thereby directly disputing the foundational premise of the entire military operation. When pressed on adversarial rhetoric explicitly calling for the destruction of America, she pragmatically dismissed it as standard adversarial posturing. She instead refocused the dialogue on the immediate lack of domestic security and the statistical reality that 3 out of every 5 Americans currently stand in direct opposition to the engagement. The secretary stubbornly maintained his belief that public support remains robust, citing regular administrative briefings, detailing the mission's parameters and emphasizing its critical necessity. He sharply criticized early legislative calls for withdrawal, drawing direct contrasts with the protracted, poorly defined operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, which he categorized as nebulous missions that the public simply went along with for years. He forcefully argued that the current initiative is entirely different, possessing a strictly defined and measurable mission architecture, a staggering $25 billion price tag, skyrocketing domestic grocery costs, and a glaring conflict entirely devoid of clear public consensus transformed this exchange into a vital moment of oversight. But Senator Gillibrand was merely initiating her inquiry. If the pursuit of complete transparency regarding these monumental financial and ethical decisions resonates, please consider taking a brief moment to subscribe and like this video immediately. The focus of the interrogation then swiftly transitioned from matters of domestic economic inflation to something of profoundly greater gravity, specifically the systematic 90% cuts to oversight and the terrifying regulations surrounding artificial intelligence targeting protocols. Despite the secretary's expressed pride in aggressively combating a determined adversary pursuing nuclear capabilities, the public recognizes political maneuvering when they see it. Citizens are highly intelligent and effortlessly understand administrative spin. When confronted once again with the terrifying discrepancy regarding missile ranges and the astronomical $200 billion supplemental funding request to finance the conflict, the defense completely faltered. Rather than confirming the budget, the secretary rested his defense on questioning the validity of the reported figures, claiming ignorance of the number's origin and patronizingly advising the senator to exercise extreme caution regarding information obtained through journalistic reporting. The rigorous interrogation then pivoted sharply to the stark tactical realities occurring on the ground. Direct questions were targeted at the justification for military strikes, resulting in the utter destruction of civilian infrastructure, encompassing medical centers, educational facilities, and non-combatant neighborhoods. Crucially, Senator Gillibrand demanded a coherent explanation for the deliberate 90% defunding of the specific division mandated to assist in mitigating civilian casualties. She highlighted the profound strategic peril of achieving isolated tactical victories while simultaneously generating immense collateral damage, questioning the ultimate long-term cost of such severe operational failures. The official response provided relied entirely on a broad assertion that the United States military operates with an unparalleled, ironclad commitment to preserving civilian life at every echelon, regardless of the operational theater or the specific weapon systems being deployed. Yet the fundamental and undeniable reality of military accountability requires rigorous, independent evaluation every single time overseas operations are conducted. Standard operational procedure mandates strict tracking by the Pentagon, coupled with thorough independent investigations into civilian harm. These dual mechanisms exist for an incredibly crucial reason, ensuring no military apparatus is ever permitted to police itself completely devoid of external civilian scrutiny. There is effectively only one method to successfully circumvent that required transparency, which involves systematically cutting the resources of the tracking department by a staggering 90%. Consequently, if the objective is to operate with impunity without answering for severe collateral damage inflicted on the ground, the strategy is to defund the investigative watchdogs and immediately pivot to a public relations speech lauding inherent military values. That deliberate evasion of accountability is exactly what transpired during the hearing. Furthermore, a crucial, largely unspoken connection deeply underlies this entire legislative exchange. A defense establishment that actively refuses to allocate funding for human investigators evaluating ground-level impacts is the exact same department currently advocating to allow artificial intelligence systems to exercise the final, irreversible call on the deployment of nuclear weapons. The degradation of civilian safety protocols and the rapid advancement of autonomous targeting are deeply connected in ways the hearing did not make explicitly clear to the general public. The senator courageously raised both of these monumental issues. She explicitly flagged the deeply concerning absence of assurances prohibiting artificial intelligence from executing final strike determinations. This represents a highly precise and serious concern. The Department of Defense has been aggressively developing and integrating AI-assisted targeting tools for several consecutive years. The internal policy debate regarding the absolute necessity of meaningful human control has been fiercely contested within the walls of the Pentagon. The delegation of ultimate strategic authority to a machine is not merely a theoretical topic for an ethics seminar, but an intensely active policy question carrying profound operational stakes. Senator Gillibrand successfully placed it firmly on the public record that she had not received a satisfactory, definitive answer regarding this technological peril. Tellingly, Secretary Hegseth did not attempt to dispute her alarming characterization of the situation. Analyzing the precise nature of the official's response reveals a distinct and deeply recognizable rhetorical strategy. When directly challenged on the severe erosion of public support, his immediate defense mechanism was to reference the valor and sacrifice of the armed forces. His secondary tactical instinct involved emphasizing the adversary's historically stated hostility toward the United States. While these talking points might resonate well during television broadcasts, they completely circumvent the actual substantive inquiries regarding the massive budget requests and the degradation of civilian protection. This is an established pattern in congressional testimony. When a government official simply cannot defend the empirical data, they immediately pivot to delivering impassioned speeches concerning patriotism instead. The fundamental problem with employing that pattern within a committee hearing is that the participating members have thoroughly completed their homework, and Senator Gillibrand had clearly mastered hers. The exact moment the two individuals began talking over one another was not merely dramatic television. It starkly illuminated the systemic dysfunction of the entire oversight system. The secretary was determinedly attempting to complete his own rehearsed narrative thoughts, while the senator was relentlessly attempting to hold him to a highly specific factual question. Two entirely different conversational objectives running simultaneously predictably produce exactly that kind of chaotic noise. What remains truly worth noticing is that Senator Gillibrand never once raised her voice, never shifted into personal attacks, and absolutely never abandoned her core line of questioning. She repeatedly returned to the exact same foundational points encompassing the astronomical financial cost, the devastating civilian toll, the structural dismantling of investigative bodies, and the resulting massive accountability gap. That kind of unwavering persistence under immense pressure is not merely a personality trait displayed in a hearing room. It is the result of a meticulously prepared legislative strategy. The specific $200 billion figure is worth pausing to consider because the secretary's response to it was highly notable. He casually dismissed the massive number as something she merely read in the news, condescendingly suggesting she be careful regarding her sources. That is a vastly different kind of answer from directly stating the number is factually incorrect and subsequently providing the correct figure. The senator was citing a figure that had explicitly appeared in credible reporting regarding supplemental appropriations requests directly connected to the military campaign. Whether the precise figure she cited was perfectly accurate is an entirely separate question from whether there is a very real and incredibly large funding request currently sitting on the table. The official's response did absolutely nothing to clarify the actual requested number. Instead, it purely redirected the conversation toward questioning source credibility. In a hearing room where the entire fundamental purpose is public accountability, that specific distinction matters considerably. The historical conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq were introduced into the dialogue in a manner that desperately requires significantly more context than the brief exchange provided. The secretary explicitly invoked them as cautionary examples of incredibly long, poorly defined missions that Congress blindly supported without demanding tangible results. His clearly implied point was that the current campaign, by sharp contrast, possesses a clearly defined mission and demonstrates measurable progress. What he entirely failed to address is the massive institutional memory problem that such a historical comparison immediately creates. Both the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan initially began with highly defined objectives, robust public confidence, and incredibly high polling numbers. Both of those engagements eroded disastrously over time precisely because the initially stated mission and the brutal ground reality stopped aligning. When a sitting Secretary of Defense deliberately invokes those two specific wars as primary examples of missions that went terribly wrong, he is certainly not strengthening his argument that the current endeavor is fundamentally different. He is directly referencing the two most significant, catastrophic examples in recent American history of exactly what occurs when a military campaign completely loses public trust and the United States Congress categorically fails to ask enough difficult questions early enough in the process. Furthermore, the closed session mentioned by the Secretary at the very opening of the exchange is absolutely not a minor, easily dismissible detail. He noted explicitly and carefully that the classified session produced a very different, vastly more substantive discussion than the public one currently taking place. He delivered this statement with what strongly appeared to be highly pointed meaning. The clear implication was that the public hearing was, at least in part, performative political theater, and that the genuinely real, highly substantive conversations only occurred within rooms where television cameras and the general public were strictly absent. That specific framing puts every single elected senator sitting in that room in an incredibly uncomfortable position because it strongly suggests that the aggressive, demanding questioning being conducted publicly is, in the Secretary's view, merely a performance designed for constituent consumption rather than a genuine exercise in vital oversight. Senator Gillibrand pushed back immediately and forcefully against this narrative by noting that her constitutional job is to represent New Yorkers, which is undeniably true, and that those New Yorkers are furious, a point she deliberately repeated twice for emphasis. But the shadow of the closed session comment lingered heavily over the proceedings. It raised a deeply troubling question that the public hearing itself could never possibly answer regarding exactly what realities were being discussed in the sealed room where the American public was strictly not allowed to listen. Senator Gillibrand's specific, targeted reference to the state of New York was absolutely not accidental geography. The city and the state possess a very deep, incredibly painful history when it comes to experiencing the real, devastating domestic impact of global conflicts. That specific constituency understands exactly and intimately what extensive military action in the Middle East actually costs a community. When she emphatically stated that her constituents are exhausted and are actively feeling the crushing weight of this war at the local gas pump and the neighborhood grocery store, she was not speaking in vague generalities. She was directly connecting abstract economic anxiety to a highly specific constituency that remembers very precisely exactly what happens when a massive military campaign launched with strong initial support slowly mutates into something entirely else over the span of many years. That heavy historical context was undeniably present in the room, even if it was not explicitly stated aloud. The final, concluding, exchange elegantly captures something incredibly important about how these hearings actually function structurally. The Secretary stated that no military works harder at every level to protect civilian lives, and the senator immediately responded with a single, highly direct question about the 90% budget cut. The chairman then immediately stepped in to formally close the round of questioning. The chairman's intervention was entirely procedural and not necessarily hostile to either party involved, but the strict timing meant that the official's general principal statement regarding values served as the final word before the round abruptly ended. That exact dynamic is precisely how a massive amount of crucial accountability actually gets completely absorbed and neutralized within these committee rooms. A highly specific, heavily documented action gets raised by a legislator. A generalized, sweeping values claim gets offered in response by the official, and the allotted time simply runs out before the glaring contradiction between the two statements can be pressed any further. Senator Gillibrand's incredibly vital final question demanding an explanation for why the department was cut by 90% was never answered. It went directly into the official congressional record completely unanswered. That single, tragically unanswered question is undeniably the most important part of this entire video breakdown. It absolutely proves that the entire congressional oversight process is fundamentally failing the American taxpayers. A highly prepared senator can ask a brilliant question. A cabinet member can simply decline to answer it directly. The clock can expire. The cameras can capture every second of the evasion, and absolutely none of that automatically produces a factual answer. The American public, which both individuals claim to be fiercely representing and speaking for in that room, simply does not possess a functional mechanism beyond waiting for the next election cycle to resolve that massive informational gap, which ultimately raises the single most important, genuinely real question lying underneath the entirety of the exchange. If the vital oversight process can be easily navigated simply by running out the clock on specific, highly damaging questions, exactly what institutional tool is left to close the vast distance between a documented government action and an honest, transparent accounting of exactly why it was taken? That is absolutely not a rhetorical question. It is exactly the kind of fundamental systemic question we all need to be asking before Washington authorizes the spending of even another $1 billion. Thank you immensely for watching, and thank you for choosing to be an active part of this vital conversation. Please leave a detailed comment below and let me know exactly what side of the debate you find yourself on. Hit the like button immediately if this specific video breakdown provided you with value or challenged you to think deeper about the issues. Click the notification bell icon so you stay fully updated every single time we upload new content. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for far more political videos, in-depth breakdowns, and rigorous structural discussions. Thanks again for watching, and we will absolutely see you in the next analysis.